Today, we are pouring out our first oil from the Jubilee field.
We look at oil as a second opportunity being given to this country.
We have made and will continue to make full disclosure.
I think the mechanisms exist to have transparency in the oil industry.
We do that by putting in place good frameworks for the exploitation of the resource.
The people of Ghana have a right to demand that we in leadership positions tell them how much we are getting from the oil and how it is being used.
We've messed up almost all our natural resources.
It's been years in the making, but now, just like the clock behind me, time almost seemed to have stopped as we wait for Parliament to consider Ghana's first, truly transparent and single, most important modern law. A law that will not only regulate oil and gas production and exploration, but will also fulfill Simon Taylor's famous quote, charging us all not to allow those who seek to gag the millions to succeed in their quest to keep us in the dark, while they sign the multi-million-dollar oil contracts that will define our collective future.
This is going to be the primary law that will govern all petroleum activities. So the consequences really will be that Ghanaians may be shortchanged if we don't get a very sound law.
This year, Ghana marks 4 years since late President Mills turned the valve for the first drop of commercial oil. That was a jubilant occasion. But 4 years on, questions abound about whether the fundamental legislation, PNDC Law 84, otherwise known as the Petroleum Exploration and Production Law, passed in 1984, can still serve the best interest of the people. In the Western region, the home of Ghanaian oil, the verdict is a resounding no.
It depresses you that with the right governance, we can become the hub of growth for the West African sub-region. But look at our infrastructure. And every day, politicians be about, oh, yeah. Let's get real. Let's get real with ourselves. Let's plan for tomorrow. And that is what this law is about. We've messed up almost all our natural resources. If this one is messed up, those in power, God should never forgive them.
People feel shortchanged, hence the need to change the law.
In this new bill, categorically, the bill requires the minister to go through open and competitive bidding process. There's also the issue of contract transparency. You know, the Ghanaians, the citizens of Ghana, are the primary owners of the resource. And so we have responsibility. It is our right to know what our government has negotiated, you know, on our behalf, in order for us to determine whether we got a fair deal or a bad deal. And so the law, the bill as it is now, also requires the minister to publish all contracts, all oil contracts, authorizations, permits, you know, through a public register. So these are, you know, fine movements in our development of the oil and gas legislation.
The new bill has strong positives, but also come with great defects. For instance, it flatters by offering petroleum agreements grounded in the universally accepted principle of open, transparent, and competitive public tender process, but then quickly deceives, giving the minister the unquestioned power to disregard the the tender process. In fact, the minister can enter into direct negotiations with any individual or group of individuals he deems qualified for an oil block.
It's like giving with the left hand and taking with the right, or giving with the right and taking with the left. Politics is everywhere, and it gives the minister too much power. If a person is perceived, a director in a company that's deemed to have won a competitive bidding is perceived to be not of the same political persuasion of the existing government, they may easily, the minister has the power, authority to easily set the result aside.
If we're going to allow direct negotiation, then we have to be very explicit under which circumstances we will allow. As the bill stands now, if it's passed, it is susceptible to certain types of corruption, misuse, because discretionary powers, if they're not firmly checked, can be or have the potential to be abused. And that will not sit well, or that will indeed not enable our resources to be used for the benefit of us Ghanaians.
But this controversial clause has its defenders, both in Parliament and in government.
This clause is not deviating from what we have in the Procurement Act, because once the Procurement Act allows that selective tendering, you have to apply through the PPP people, Procurement Act authority, and then they can, based on the reasons that you offer, they will allow you. And so I'm sure this provision is taking reference to that of the Procurement Act. And so if we are not criticizing that clause in the Procurement Act which allows that flexibility, I don't think it would be fair for us to also criticize, because as I said, some of these oil issues are very technical. Leaders of this country, ministers, chief directors, we always exercise our discretion on behalf of Ghanaians. And so I'm sure we'll be guided by that, and always we'll try to do the right thing to benefit the larger people.
Today you may say that you are in government, so you do whatever you want. It will not be there forever. Your government eventually will leave office and a new government will come. So it is in all our collective interest to make sure that the right thing is done.
The Solar-Powered Energy Ministry drafted the new EMP bill. We knocked on its doors with a question. Why did they include this controversial clause in an otherwise progressive legislation?
When we say that the minister is not obliged to enter into a PA, a petroleum agreement, after a tender process, it is because you may invite bids. You would evaluate these bids based on people's or companies' technical and financial capabilities. You may not find a company that fits the bill, that is competent enough technically or financially or both for you to sign a petroleum agreement with. You don't expect the minister to enter into a petroleum agreement when you are in such a situation or circumstance. Secondly, we say that where the minister, in consultation with the Petroleum Commission, right, so it's not just the minister, in consultation with the Commission, decides that, in fact, direct negotiations is the most efficient or optimal way to go, then the minister need not enter a petroleum agreement through a competitive tender process.
The efficiency criteria is quite subjective, you know, because who defines efficiency? Is it the minister? Is it the Petroleum Commission? And if the parameters of what constitutes efficiency are not provided in the law, then you subject the definition of efficiency to too much discretion. If we leave it the way it is, it means that the minister can avoid awarding an oil contract through an open and competitive bidding process, and then to use his own definition of efficiency to select a company of his choice, who are going to be the owners of these companies. Whether the minister will even have an interest in those companies he's selecting based on the efficiency criteria, nobody knows. If they have given the minister, some kickbacks to somehow facilitate the acquisition of that contract, and thereby influencing the minister's definition of efficiency, who will know? And this is why I say that it creates too much room for abuse.
The consequences of allowing one person to define for 25 million others what is most efficient and thus in their best interest is obvious. The danger is even more pronounced when you consider that the bill does not have a single provision making it mandatory to disclose the true identities of those behind and benefiting from these multi-million-dollar contracts.
It's a major concern in that you have offshore, if you go to the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, those places, people form companies, shell companies, that can be used as vehicles to obtain these oil blocks in developing countries just like ours. The people behind these companies may be shady people with drug money, all sorts of even corrupt money, governments stealing money from their people to buy back, try to legitimize the money that they've stolen, more or less like money laundering. And then they come to the country, use local directors to form a company and then acquire oil blocks. It is very necessary that the good people of this country get to know who are the main beneficial interests.
In one complex instance of trying to identify the beneficial owners of a petroleum agreement, let's look at AGM Ghana, which was given a petroleum block. AGM Ghana is owned 100% by AGM Gibraltar. So what that means is that if you go to Registrar General, you only know AGM Gibraltar as the owner of AGM Ghana. AGM Gibraltar is also owned by Minesco OGG, AGR, and Metsonga. Minesco OGG is also owned by Minesco Petroleum, WA Natural Resources. AGR is also owned by AGR Group, which is also a subsidiary of Alto. Minesco Petroleum and WA Natural Resources is also owned by Minesco Group. So this is a complex chain trying to identify the individuals who owns these companies, and we still don't know yet.
One of these agreements that came through Parliament, we had to raise concern because the local content, the company that was being carried for the 5%, the face behind it, I actually asked to know who the people were. And when the names came, I was very surprised. A person I happened to know, written glowing reports about themselves as to their experience in the industry, when I knew that these people deal in something completely different, completely different, with no experience at all in the oil industry.
Which particular company?
I don't mention because it's, pardon me, please allow me not to.
Was it eventually passed?
It was. It was. We made the comments and everything, but of course we had our say, but they had their way. The government had its way.
In other jurisdictions, the ministers, I think it's South Sudan actually, which
South
is
Sudan.
South Sudan, yeah, where the minister is by law with petroleum agreements required to disclose even the justifications for choosing particular, let's say, companies or contractors, their ethical stance, their previous dealings, their financial stead, all of that.
As it stands, this bill is far short of the required international standards already being championed by nascent African democracies. South Sudan is the world's newest country. It only gained its independence in 2011 from Sudan after years of devastating conflict. The fact that the South Sudanese petroleum exploration and production law is far more transparent than Ghana's proposed bill tells its own story. In South Sudan, they know the consequences of an ill-governed oil sector. It can be deadly, as their past of bloodshed shows. In Nigeria, years of secrecy and lack of open and transparent petroleum sector led to corruption, costing the country an estimated $400 billion between 1960 and 1999. Ghana cannot afford to lose that much.
If you go into sole sourcing or single sourcing, you could be losing out at the negotiation table because you have only one party to deal with. And assuming, for example, that Ghana lost just 1% in the Jubilee field, that translates to 1,000 barrels a day. Multiply that, do the arithmetic for a month, and over the contract period, you are losing about $900 million for just 1%. So you want to avoid that by making sure that everybody interested in the block presents their financial capacity and competency for you to assess and choose one so you don't lose out.
This is a country where school children still learn under trees. A truly transparent bill will prevent corruption, saving money to give these children some quality education within the shelter of a proper classroom. The Energy Ministry concedes it has to do something to enhance the bill's transparency and accountability mechanisms, but is only willing to act after the bill is passed in its current form.
Regulations are being developed. We're currently developing regulations which will better explain what you see, because the bill cannot say everything. So in the regulations, we give instances, we point you specifically at the circumstances under which the minister would use direct negotiation. It's not like the minister has a complete free hand, but the regulations will clearly spell out the circumstances under which the minister can do that.
Most of the time, because politicians are, interested in exercising discretion, they usually do not bring the regulations. And therefore, the temptation to keep the regulations away and continue exercising the discretionary power is very high. And so much damage could be caused. Even if the regulations are delayed for 1 month, so much damage could be caused to Ghana's petroleum sector.
The time to act is now, and the ball is now in the court of the people's representative, Parliament.
And I would ask our parliamentarians to take this extremely seriously, not to act as a rubber stamp, because at the end of the day, Parliament is an oversight committee and a legislature. So they should do their job. And if there's anything, any provisions which they are unsure of, then they should send it back, as they have done in the past. So I really, really do think that this is Parliament's time to exercise its powers to the fullest and not act simply as a rubber stamp.